Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you've had a wonderful weekend of watching NCAA tournament basketball and, of course, NIT basketball as Ohio State continues its winning ways under new head coach Jake Diebler. He's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. This is Talking Stuff. We are going to talk some Ohio State football recruiting as we are wont to do on this show. It's Sunday evening. The goal is simple, Andrew, to talk about things that have happened. And it's been a pretty busy week for Ohio State on the recruiting trail. Lots of new offers, a lot of key visitors. And I don't know exactly that there's a right place or a wrong place to start as we break down this episode, but I think it's important to stay close to home, go up to Cleveland, St. Ignatius safety, Cody Haddad, who, as we've talked about on previous shows, like there was going to be a time when he made a visit that he didn't announce, that he didn't want to talk about. That first visit happened last Thursday. And then he turned around and made a second visit on Saturday as he and his father were on the way down to Dayton to watch St. Ignatius in the state basketball Final Four. So it provided Ohio State a 2-visit window. And it seems like the Buckeyes are pretty all in on Cody Haddad. And so I think that you were the first to bring this up to my attention a few weeks ago, that like Cody, who has played his recruitment very professionally. He does not get involved in all of the online drama. He does not seek attention, but that he had removed any mention of Wisconsin and that he had deleted his commitment post from his social media. And at that point, it sort of seemed like, okay, maybe this kid is really reopening things and getting ready to take a different look at other schools. And that happened, obviously, with Ohio State. What's your thought about just the way that he handled that, number one? But then from there, it seems like Ohio State now becomes the perceived leader, but there is conversation about Iowa. There's conversation about Duke and Texas A&M, teams that and coaches that he's had good relationships with before. And, of course, Wisconsin's still in the mix as well, because there's been no public announcement or anything about what's going on. So how do you view it at this point?
So I think right when Ohio State offered him, I think most fans kind of maybe penciled him into the 2025 class, which was probably the right move. As far as the social media stuff goes, I think that type of thing might be meaningless for some players, some recruits. But when you're dealing with a kid who's kind of handled things the way he has, keeping everything on the DL, not saying much, I think when he did that, it probably did say a lot. So I think right now, all that I'm looking to see is, does he decommit from Wisconsin, or does he just straight flip to Ohio State, or does he take a couple of those other visits, like you said? I know we've talked a lot about Fahim Delane being the number one safety target out there, but there's no reason to think Ohio State wouldn't accept a commitment from a player like Cody Haddad right now. So I'm just kind of interested to see what happens over the next week or so with that one.
Yeah, they are 100% would accept that commitment, is what I've been told. It's the facts of the matter are they wouldn't offer him when they did in January if they weren't willing to do that. It's from Cleveland St. Ignatius. It's not a situation where you offer that kid and then don't accept it or tell him to come camp or anything like that. That's just not the way it is. And I know people are interested in star chasing, but Cody Haddad is a 4-star prospect. He is 6 foot tall, 175, 180 pounds. I mean, I've seen some people have him listed at closer to 6'1". It doesn't really matter. Cut on the tape. The kid is special athletically. His father played in the NFL. His grandfather played in the NFL. He has an uncle who played in the NFL. There is a genetic code here that you want to be a part of if you're a college football program. And aside from that, what I've heard about him from other coaches is that they just love the football IQ. They think that he is a kid who is next level as far as his intelligence and his the way he handles not just his recruitment, but the way he handles his teammates, the way he works on the field. He's the type of player you need in your program. That's just the way it is. You have to have guys like that. And when you couple all of the football IQ and all that stuff with the fact that he's a freak athletically, it's a pretty good fit. And the question people will have is, okay, if he does try to commit to Ohio State quickly, does that impact Fahim Delane? Does that impact Ohio State and the rest of what they're doing? And even with guys like Trey McNutt, who is now, I think, the number 1 ranked safety in the country, according to a couple different outlets, over Delane, whether it's Dorian Brew, whether it's Kainoa Winston out of Washington, D.C., who visited this weekend, whether it's Deshaun Stewart out of New Jersey, who visited this weekend. Like, there's a group of 5 or 6 guys that I think Matt Guerrieri has basically said, we're going to take 3 of you, and whoever wants in, get in. And that's the way it's going to have to be, because if you're at Ohio State right now, and especially the way that safety recruiting went the last 2 years, I don't know that you can just willfully tell kids, hold off, because if Haddad decides to make a decision that isn't Wisconsin, then if you're not willing to say yes, come in right now, like, you're not going to get a second or third shot at that 6 months from now. So you have to say yes if you're Ohio State. And the Buckeyes are very interested in Kainoa Winston again from Washington, D.C., Gonzaga High School. He visited this weekend. He told me he has not set up his official visit yet, but he's working on that with the coaching staff. Deshaun Stewart in New Jersey, like I said, I've seen some pretty glowing comments from him about his visit. So that's someone to watch now. And then there's Delane, who, like Trey McNutt, seems to be very much just enjoying this process. He was down at LSU last weekend. I think he's got official visits set to Oregon, LSU, probably Texas. I mean, there's going to be probably a longer runway there than anticipated when all of the crystal balls and RPMs and all those things started coming in for Delane 2 months ago.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, the simple thing is they just cannot have a repeat performance of the last couple cycles at safety. So that's pretty much cut and dry. That's what's going on here. And there's no reason to think, just given the number of guys, 5 or 6 guys right now that they're in the running for, and several they seem to be, the front runner for. So it's just a matter of when do these dominoes start to fall. Did Delane have an actual commitment date set at one point? Or were we just kind of speculating maybe it was coming and then it never came? I'm trying to remember what that.
Yeah, I think everyone just he there was a video he posted that looked like he had something come in. He had like the deleted committed post tweet where it just wrote committed. Like, there's a lot of things in the air between him and Trey McNutt, who I think are the natural fits that we would like. If you were to handicap this race and you think, okay, if Cody Haddad's 1, who are 2 and 3, it's probably most likely McNutt and Delane, but neither one of those two seem to be in any real hurry to make a decision. April 8th, we'll see Trey McNutt cut down his list. I think the plan is to cut it down to 8 schools. Obviously, Ohio State will be in that mix. There's a lot of question marks that he's trying to sort through right now about whether or not he's actually going to play football in Ohio this year. So there's things that he's worried about that are much bigger than the recruiting process. And for guys like him, Dorian Brew, who I don't know really what position Dorian Brew is being recruited at this point. It's just defensive back. Those guys are going to take a lot longer. I don't see Cody Haddad taking a long time to make his next big decision, whatever it comes up being, whether it's sticking with Wisconsin or flipping to Ohio State or somewhere else. I would imagine just figuring out like who this kid is and what makes him tick. Like he's not going to be someone who plays that game very long. So I would be shocked if he wasn't the first commitment at safety in this class for Ohio State, but I don't know that there's a perfect handle on when to expect that. That's one of those things. Like, again, he's not the type of kid that's going to go on social media and put a big, on this date, I'm making a decision. Like, he's just going to drop a commitment tweet, probably won't have a graphic. It'll probably just be, very short and sweet and to the point. And whenever that happens, I think the fact that he made 2 visits to Ohio State this weekend is a pretty good sign for Ohio State moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I think the fan side of things is probably the dream scenario, like for someone like me, is Fahim Delane, Trey McNutt, and then one of the other guys, probably Cody Haddad, based on what you're saying. Is that probably the most likely scenario at this point then, would you project?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at probably 5 or 6 guys that are very real options, and I think that is the most likely way it breaks down. Again, with Haddad probably sooner than later, and the other guys, I mean, Delane has said all along he wanted to make a decision in the summer, so that still sort of tracks. Trey McNutt has said he wants to make a decision before his senior year, but again, a lot of these things change, and because now we're in this world where official visits, you can take as many as you want. Like you never know come November, if someone says, "Oh, you know what, I'm going to go take a visit to USC, or I'm going to go visit Miami," like the guys like Cody Haddad are not going to do that. He's not interested in that part of the recruiting process, probably because he's got a father that's gone through it, and his family just isn't really seeking that attention. But in the world where brand building is paramount for these kids, and rightfully so in most cases, like it's hard to get a feel for when anyone's going to make these decisions because they don't have to hurry into anything. And every minute, every day, every week that you stay uncommitted, your value goes up and people, want to throw more money at you.
Right. And then that Jonah Williams kid from Texas or whatever, I think projected to Oklahoma right now, but I thought I saw somebody on the Oklahoma side said that Ohio State was maybe the biggest threat there. I guess he could play linebacker eventually too. So I don't know if there's going to be any movement on that one or not.
No, Ohio State's not recruiting him as a linebacker. He is another guy that's in that list of 5 or 6 safeties who is worth paying attention to. He's visited multiple times. He wants to come up and visit this spring. He's extremely close with Devin Sanchez and his family. So like there is a reason to keep him on the list. But yeah, I mean, everyone believes he's going to Oklahoma. But there are a lot of people, as you said, believe he's going to play linebacker, and he certainly doesn't. But I think a lot of these kids are realizing as they get further into their process that if they start to hear those things like, okay, I'm going to be a linebacker here, if they don't want to play it, then all of a sudden that school gets locked out of the discussion. But I've talked to Jonah about that, and he says that he wants to play safety, and so that's what Ohio State's been recruiting him as. It's not a situation where James Laurinaitis is recruiting him. I can tell you that much. There's only a couple guys that he's recruiting in this class. TJ Alford is the main one to talk about. He visited this weekend. His commitment date is still set for March 30th. It's still Ohio State. It's Miami. It's Florida State. I think he's also got like plans to take official visits to maybe Central Florida come summertime. Obviously, TJ was on Bermanology earlier this week talking about his visit. And I thought the interesting thing was that he said he's already asked all of the schools, like, if it's cool if he takes official visits, even though he'll be committed on Saturday. Everyone said yes. Everyone said no problem, which I think is pretty cool that he's like asked people that and is handling things that way, because there are certainly other kids who are not going to do that and just say, I'm going to do what I want and no one's going to stop me. But it seems, Andrew, that like with now 6 days to the decision, I'd have a real tough time buying that anybody beats Ohio State for his commitment on Saturday. Now then the question becomes, how does the game unfold from there? Because everyone's believed, at least I think peripherally, that Ohio State was the favorite, and that gives everyone a target, which is the Buckeyes. And now, like, if he does commit to Ohio State next Saturday, the target on the Buckeyes' back becomes even larger. But it's different because the relationship with Ohio State will change at that point if he does pick Ohio State, because it will be about like real talk. It'll be about football. It's going to be about, hey, when you come up to visit, we're talking about install. We're talking about defensive strategy. It's not come up and visit and we're going to tell you how cool you are. Like, other schools are still going to be doing that. And so I think it's a fascinating exercise into the mentality of high school students when one relationship changes into being something much more serious and the other ones remain superficial. At what point does the need for that superficial love become compelling enough to make you say, well, you know what, Coach Laurinaitis is only talking to me about, he's not loving me like he used to, like, because that'll change, those are the things that teams will try to use against Ohio State. But it seems like James Laurinaitis has been used to teams negatively recruiting against him for the last year. So I think that Ohio State would be in a pretty good position to withstand it long term.
Yeah, I get the vibe that he is going to commit to Ohio State next weekend, which basically everybody projects at this point. And then it's just going to be one of those recruitments that's not for the faint of heart, one of those typical Florida type of battles. And I mean, props to the kid for being up front with the staffs. I'm sure he's talked to Laurinaitis about, hey, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. Dad saying that he wants him to stay closer to home is one thing. And maybe his dad was with him this weekend and that totally changed. I have absolutely no idea as we sit here today. But getting him in the fold next week is going to be great, but then keeping him in the fold until December with Miami and Florida State and everybody else lurking, that's going to be a tall task for the Ohio State's new linebackers coach, I think.
Yeah. So to be clear, dad did visit, so did mom, so did stepdad. And the message that dad has had for TJ Alford, his 4-star linebacker son, is that you do what you need to do and I'm going to support you. And that's great. And I think that's the right approach, obviously. But it doesn't mean that there's not going to be moments of contention or dad saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to go this far?" Because that's what a parent should do. It should be like, "Hey, are you 100% on this? Are you 100% on this? Are you sure you don't want to be closer to home?" Now, that will happen no matter what happens next Saturday. But either way, Ohio State is going to host him for an official visit in June. Central Florida is going to host him. Miami's going to host him. Florida State's going to host him. Maybe Florida, maybe not Florida State. Maybe Florida. I don't know. One of those teams. But it poses like the age-old question, like, is it better to be in the front or is it better to be chasing it at that point? And, we saw, remember when Mikel Williams, the linebacker or defensive end from Georgia, committed to USC a few years ago, and he committed like really early, and everyone, and Christian Miller was in the same class, and everyone's like, "Oh, USC did a great job. They steal these guys." And then like Georgia had 10 months to undermine it. And then they both ended up signing with Georgia. And then today, like USC gets 2 5-star commitments from defensive linemen from Georgia who committed to USC after a weekend visit. And like, it's very likely that the outcome is the same for those two as it was for Mikel Williams and Christian Miller. But would you rather be in the front or would you rather be trailing? Because I think it matters to be successful and people to know that they're, in like with you. But how does it makes it very difficult long-term to hold on to these commitments. And I'm not suggesting that TJ Alford is like, if he commits to Ohio State next weekend, it's not worth being excited about because of the inevitable fight that comes over the next 7 months. But like, it is going to be a fight.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that those guys deciding to eventually sign with Georgia, they were signing with the year-to-year national championship contenders, back-to-back national champs, whatever. Miami is, nowhere close to that right now, of course. I remember talking to you back in December about Jeremiah Smith and how, that was another situation where I'm sure dad, who probably was a Miami fan and watched Miami win the national title in the early 2000s and whatnot, probably preferring him stay close to home. Obviously, with that one, Brian Hartline was able to keep him with his commitment and keep him signed. And obviously now he's in Columbus, losing his black stripe and all that kind of stuff. So now we'll just see if James Laurinaitis is up for that same challenge, I guess.
Yeah. I think that you're going to be seeing in Ohio State recruiting class that they are going to lean on TJ Alford if he picks the Buckeyes next weekend to really be the vocal. Like Devin Sanchez is a really good peer-to-peer recruiter. He's a cornerback, and he does a lot of his work behind the scenes. I think that there's something to be said for having like a bad mamma jamma at linebacker leading the way. And Eli Lee, who's a very good player that's committed to Ohio State, is another very private, kind of introspective, very close to the vest type of player. He's done a nice job trying to motivate his teammates like Albert Hill and Sam Greer at Akron Hoban to commit, but he's not out there like publicly front facing. And when you land a commitment from a kid like TJ Alford from Florida, big national profile, like he has the opportunity to really do some damage in Ohio State's favor on the recruiting trail as a lead recruiter for the defense. So it should be a good week for Ohio State, but we have 6 days until that commitment is finalized or at least announced. And then barring any changes, I think it'll be Ohio State, but that's the way the world goes these days. So like anything changes. Everything changes.
I think he's actually visiting Florida State this week too. Not that we would expect that to change anything. It has seemed like Miami has been kind of the top competition there for a while now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the kid has been enamored with Ohio State even before he was camping with the Buckeyes last summer, even before visiting, even before James Laurinaitis was announced as the full-time or linebackers coach. Like, he's been very much into Ohio State for a while. So it would be, again, a surprise. And the only real way I think it turns up different is if, for whatever reason, the pressure from dad or mom who decides all of a sudden to hey, stay here, gets ramped up a notch. And from talking to people on Sunday, talking to TJ, the expectation is that dad is copacetic with whatever he decides. So that's the way it could be. Wide receiver is another position that Ohio State has a former Buckeye player coaching. Brian Hartline's still pretty good at recruiting. This week, DeCorian Moore was on campus. That's a big one. Vernell Brown III from Florida was on campus at the same time as the aforementioned DeCorian Moore. And then this weekend, Ohio State had Khalil Lockett from Dallas area on campus. Those are outside of Javen Boggs, who made a visit to Missouri over the last couple of days, which is interesting in some regard. Not really, because Ohio State's not worried about it, but it's like, of all the places you'd think that Tampa, you wouldn't imagine Cocoa, Florida guy just makes a random visit to Missouri, but he did. Those three guys between DeCorian Moore, Khalil Lockett, and Vernell Brown, Jamie French, like, there is a very small group of guys that Brian Hartline seems to have at the top of his wish list. Taylon Taylor from Illinois is another one on that group, like that, and he's visiting this coming week. So, like, all these guys are going to be on campus at some point in this last week or next week. So it seems like Hartline is starting to zero in on his dudes. And like, when that happens, it generally turns out pretty well for Ohio State. Have you watched any of these guys, and do you have a favorite?
Yeah. DeCorian Moore is my favorite of the group. I am kind of intrigued by Vernell Brown, though, because I feel like he would bring something different to the offense a bit. But, in years past, we've said the same thing about like Mookie Cooper and guys like that. Not that I'm saying him and Mookie Cooper are identical by any means, but yeah, DeCorian Moore is right at the top of my list. I think I like Jamie French as well. And I saw the Tennessee side had an update for him coming out of his visit there this week, saying that they think Ohio State is far and away the team to beat. So I have no idea how these dominoes are going to fall into place for Brian Hartline, but there's no reason to worry about it. But if I had to pick one of them, it would be DeCorian Moore.
Yeah, I mean, Tavian St. Clair was on campus with DeCorian Moore, with Vernell Brown, with Khalil Lockett. Tavian was on campus 3 different days this week for Ohio State, like making sure he was there, talking to different people around the program. Like, I think that Ohio State believes that it's them or Tennessee for French. They believe that Florida or Florida State and Ohio State are still the big 3 when it comes to Vernell Brown. Miami obviously involved as well, because they're in the state of Florida and that's what they do. DeCorian Moore, like, the Buckeyes know that they're in it, and obviously they're one of 4 teams that he has publicly stated he will continue to look at. So the question is exactly how real is that interest? How willing is he to leave the state of Texas? Because, as I said on, I don't know if it was last week's show or 2 weeks ago, it's my belief and understanding from talking to people in Texas that I think LSU might be 4th on his list right now, even though he's committed to LSU and has been for over a year. I think that you could see either Texas or Oregon or Ohio State end up being the team that eventually lands him. But I personally would not be like over the moon excited at this point yet about Ohio State's chances until he gets on campus with his parents and until mom is with him for a visit and sees what it's all about. Because the last trip, the one that took place on Monday, was with his trainer. It's not a situation where family was there and got a chance to really dive into the minutia of Ohio State. So, like, be optimistic, but don't be like expecting anything with that, because that one seems like something will take a little bit longer to unfold.
Yeah. And then, Vernell Brown's a Florida legacy. So there's little factors going on with all of these guys. I know very little about Taylon Taylor. I've not watched his film or anything like that. I know you've regularly mentioned him as one of the big 4 to 5 to 6 guys that Hartline likes. So I'm interested to see what comes out of that visit coming up. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because Ohio State is not really ever mentioned in the recruitment of Taylor Taylor. It seems like Michigan gets mentioned a lot. It seems like Notre Dame gets mentioned a ton. There's a belief out there that it's actually Notre Dame and Georgia as the top two in that recruitment. And I don't know why Ohio State continues to be sort of ignored by people in that battle. But there's 19 players at wide receiver that I think that are showing up as far as offers go from Brian Hartline. And of that group, like, I think there's really only 7 or 8 that would be welcome to commit to Ohio State at this point. Maybe less than that. I'm looking at it right now, like DeCorian Moore, Khalil Lockett, Jamie French. The Dallas Wilson down in Florida, but he's committed to Oregon. Dalen McCutcheon at Lovejoy, who's a teammate of Peyton Pierce, as a player Ohio State was pretty high on, but it seems like that's not really developed the way that they would have liked. Phillip Bell in California, Taylor. Like it's not a big list. Winnie Watkins down at IMG, who's a really good player, but I don't know that Ohio State wants to go down that road. Seems like a lot of drama between here and signing day. And then Quincy Porter in New Jersey, who's listed as an athlete by some websites, but he's like that bigger 6'4", 200-pound receiver that Ohio State's been recruiting a lot of. The rest of the guys are not that way. So I think this class has a potential to be a much more a much smaller class, like physically, than the last couple have been, because you add guys like Jeremiah Smith, who are humans, human monsters. Like, that's different. But Hartline seems to be narrowing in his guys, and that's what's important, because again, when he makes that decision to be like, this is my group, like, generally speaking, the future Buckeyes come out of that group. It's not often he deviates or has to go to plan B.
And Jamie French is not on the visit list for this month. Is that correct?
Jamie French is visiting next weekend.
He is visiting next
so
week.
is Vernell Brown. Yeah. And Vernell Brown's coming back. So it's the last couple of years, you probably remember, like, the South Florida Express group comes up around April 1st. It'll be that same thing. Jamie French is supposed to be there on, I think, April 1st. So that's big. And again, like, at safety right now, Ohio State's not pushing anyone to say, okay, you need to commit right now. Like a guy like Cody Haddad, for example, where you'd think that Ohio State could probably squeeze a little bit and say, hey, if you want in this class, you need to make that decision relatively soon. They're not doing that at all. And Brian Hartline has never been that way. But his is more of an understated, like, if I'm recruiting you this hard, it's because you need to get in this class. And so, he's done a great job putting players into the position to realize that if he selects them, it means something pretty important. So Jamie French has not talked about an early decision after reopening his recruitment following Nick Saban's retirement. But I guess I'm going to say I wouldn't be entirely shocked if, like, that weekend visit ends up spurring him to that decision. Because if the Buckeyes are truly that far out in front in his recruitment, as a lot of people nationally seem to think they are, and certainly there's confidence in Columbus about it, why keep waiting?
So would you like to
Jeremiah Smith?
Yeah, that's true. Would you like to revise your stance on Jamie French from a few weeks ago about not having him in the class?
I said that I had him out. I said I had him out because I thought at the time that his recruitment may take longer to unfurl. And I think that the more I talk to people about it, the more I try and dissect what could happen at wide receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being in the class. So I will say he's going to be in. I think Ohio State is in. The problem is when a position coach is able to receive a commitment from 90% of the kids that he really wants, like 95% of the recruits he really wants, like, Brian Hartline has to be extremely diligent and careful about how he recruits kids. Because if you are making a real concerted effort for DeCorian Moore, for example, it becomes a lot harder to sell that in June if Jamie French and Javen Boggs and Vernell Brown are all committed. So now, I mean, he's done it. He's been amazing at it in the last couple of years. But if you remember, like Elijah Moore from Baltimore last year, like that was a player that Ohio State was confident in, was going to go to Ohio State, and that got down to nitty gritty. And he looked at the roster and said, "Why would I do that? I can go to Florida State and thrive there without having all these other guys in front of me." And like, it's not being afraid to compete; it's like just being smart, I think.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, that makes
Anything
sense.
Let's go. So one guy who was definitely in a hurry to commit, and I think it's just because he doesn't like the process, is Jared Curtis, the country's #1 ranked quarterback out of Nashville in the 2026 class. Ohio State was this close back in January. They would have landed a commitment from him back then had he visited as he was expected to. He didn't because Corey Dennis was let go, and then Bill O'Brien came in, and then he disappeared. And that really derailed Ohio State's momentum with him. There was some discussion and a belief that he was going to visit next weekend also on the weekend of April 1st. And he isn't because he committed to Georgia on Saturday. So as you look at this, like, it sucks, because he's the #1 ranked quarterback in the country in that class now that Julian Lewis is reclassified to 2025. And Ohio State was in a great position, but it's still super early. Like, it's hard to get worked up about it because, number one, the odds of Jared Curtis staying committed to Georgia from now until signing day in 2 years is low. I mean, that's just, it's low. I mean, things happen. Too many things happen too frequently to suggest that someone's going to stay committed for 2 years to anyone, no matter how good they are. Beyond that, you are still evaluating and trying to figure out what type of player someone actually is when they've only played 12 games of high school football. And yeah, there's a lot to like about Jared Curtis. He was on Verminology a couple months ago. Like, the fact he's only played quarterback for like 2 years, you get a sense that he's got a really special upside. But if you think back to when Dylan Raiola committed to Ohio State, like all the hype in the world, Quinn Ewers, when he committed to Ohio State, like all that buzz, all that hype meant nothing by the time that it came down to signing day, because players get better, players choose other options. Ohio State is going to be careful when it comes to recruiting quarterbacks, as always. They did offer 2 this weekend: Jonas Williams from Illinois and Dia Bell from American Heritage High School in Florida. Dia Bell is the son of Raja Bell, former NBA player. So the athleticism is pretty off the charts. Both of these kids are about 6'3", 190 pounds. Good throwers of the ball. They both camped at Ohio State a year ago, so you've got some sense of who they are. They both visited in the last 3 days. Will Griffin from Tampa, he visited last Tuesday. So they've offered 5 quarterbacks in the class of 2026. 3 of them visited in the last week. Brady Smigel from California has not visited yet. He's told me that he's still working on getting dates set up. Michigan is probably the front runner there. So it's even more important for Ohio State to find a way to get themselves involved. But it's March 24th, and there's 18 months until these guys can sign the letter of intent. So it's hard to get too concerned.
Yeah. And with Curtis, that just seemed like one with Corey Dennis's departure. It seemed like that was a blow, but then it sounded like he was going to get back to campus, as you said, and that didn't happen. So now he's committed to Georgia. I did not know that Michigan was maybe out in front for Brady Smigel. So that's unfortunate news. I'm a big fan of his after watching his highlight tape. So hopefully they can get him into town here at some point. But the general rule here is there's absolutely never any reason to worry about quarterback recruiting with Ryan Day there. So, that's just how it is.
Yeah. And if you look at the list, you've got Bell at 6'2", 195, Williams at 6'3", 190, Curtis at 6'4", 225, Smigel at 6'5", 205, Will Griffin at 6'3", 225. They're looking for a big, strong kid at quarterback in that class. But here we are again. Most of these kids are 16 years old, if that, just turning 16. There's a lot of time for players to develop physically. If you look in the state of Ohio, you still have Nathan Bernard at 6'6", 230 pounds. He's a huge kid. So this summer will be pretty important when it comes to the 2026 quarterback recruiting as all these guys get back to campus. And that's what Jonas Williams said he will be doing. Dia Bell said he'll be doing that. I assume Will Griffin will come back and camp again. Smigel is expected to camp or visit. And so once that happens, you'll get a much better sense of things. And there's other quarterbacks to like pay attention to also. But it's still too early. Still too early. Brady Hart, who is Javen Boggs' quarterback at Cocoa, is a really good player. He's going to visit and camp this summer. So like there's a lot of things in moving around there. Why do you like Smigel?
Well,
Precious.
part of it is I like his name, but no, I don't know. His tape just looked good to me. I have a thing for California quarterbacks too. I don't even know why. Maybe it's the whole CJ Stroud thing. But yeah, I like him.
Was he any good?
Yeah, Stroud was pretty good. He plays for the Texans now. He was in Columbus last week. Not sure if you saw that or if you had a chance to talk to him by chance. But yeah, I mean,
he's still there. I mean, he was speaking 5 days in Columbus.
Yeah, I saw that. Just the amount of time he was giving you guys was pretty awesome. But yeah, I like what I've seen on the Smigel footage, I guess, Smigel, whatever. But like you said, just kind of how these guys develop. Like I remember when how Tavian St. Clair's body has changed from a year ago to now. Some of these guys are going to be going through the exact same thing. So what they look like now is going to be vastly different from what they look like a year from now.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, not to get derailed here, but CJ Stroud is so awesome. Like it's so incredible how valuable it is that Ohio State has players like CJ Stroud who have come through. And even if he was like the world's biggest jackass, which he's not, like recruits and people around the country would still be, oh my gosh, CJ Stroud went to Ohio State. But then when you see him and the way he interacts with people, watching him on Thursday and seeing like all these recruits from high schools all over Ohio, like taking pictures with him, like it does such wonders for Ohio State to have CJ Stroud and the genuineness that he presents when he's around his former coaches is so great for Ohio State. And this week, like Ohio State needs to find ways to get CJ, guys like Paris Johnson, like they need to be around during these big recruiting weekends because it really does show people something different about Ohio State. And I know every former player loves their former coaches, but like it is significantly different watching Stroud and Ryan Day when they interact is watching Ryan Day interact with anyone else. Like it's like you can just tell they genuinely like love one another. It's really awesome to see.
Yeah. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't watched you and Austin talking to him last week to go back and watch that interview. I think my favorite part is when you guys tried to like tell him, we're going to let you go. And then he was like, no, let's stick around. Let's keep going. And he like, just to talk to you like you guys were all best friends in the whole wide world. So I don't know. It was awesome.
It was really cool to have that opportunity. I'm not gonna lie, because we told him before the interview, we're like, oh, three minutes, we'll get you out of here. And then he's like, no, let's keep going. Like we had to stop him. Like when we finally did stop, it was like, okay, CJ, you got to go. Like you got to go. But he loves it because he realized that Ohio State was really actually good to him, despite the fact that throughout the time there, it didn't always seem that way. And like it is that way though, and that's. It sometimes takes leaving someplace and realizing like, oh my gosh, in the NFL, these dudes are right up like this in your face in the locker room, and they don't respect you. They don't have that courtesy. Like, we certainly try to do that. But, speaking of courtesy, it would be a courtesy if Ryan Day and Ohio State would hire a running backs coach because, well, Andrew, Bo Jackson, Marquise Davis are visiting Michigan this week. Jordan Davison is now saying Michigan's on his list after, now he's down at Alabama this weekend. Like it's getting to a point where Ryan Day is not going to hurry, and everyone knows that, but it would sure be good with Jordan Davison expected to make a 4-day visit starting this Wednesday. And as far as we know, that visit is still on. Like here's what I portend will happen. Ryan Day will give Jordan Davison a very detailed look at exactly who he's thinking about hiring. certainly not going to ask him for his, opinion or give the kid the ability to choose someone. But Jordan Davison will leave Ohio State if he visits with a much better idea of what Ryan Day's intentions are than anyone in the media actually knows. So, that's what you have to count on at this point, because you're not going to have that running backs coach in there by the time he's, on campus.
Yeah, and that's 3 days from now when he's expected to make that visit. So, I mean, who knows? Tomorrow morning we could get news that Ohio State's made the hire. Now, would that person be there when Davison's there? Probably not. But I mean, this stuff is it just seems like all of it's so rapidly changing. Like somebody's name seems at the top of the list, and then maybe there's a buyout, or maybe there's something else going on. And it's impossible to even keep up with. I think it's safe to say at this point, Ohio State is not going to be able to bring anybody who's got much of a relationship with Jordan Davison. They're not going to get Alabama's coach. They're not going to get Tashard Choice from Texas. So I'm fascinated to see how this all plays out. I kind of thought they'd have somebody named by now, and in a perfect world, they probably would. There was some DeMarco Murray talk there for a while. But yeah, this is crunch time with all these running backs coming to town here in the next week or so.
Yeah, I think Ohio State believed pretty strongly that they had enough done with DeMarco Murray to win that battle. And then, like a lot of coaches will do, it seemed to be that he was using the Ohio State opportunity as a chance to re-leverage himself against Oklahoma. I don't know that was the intention when the conversations began, but at some point, everyone in his position will do the same thing. Chance Luper at Missouri is a name that we keep hearing. I mean, there's the running backs coach at South Carolina. The name
isn't it Curtis Luper?
Curtis Luper? I thought it was Chance Luper.
Maybe I'm wrong,
but I don't know. No, it's Curtis Luper. You're right. It's Curtis Luper. My brain doesn't really work that well. I think the interesting part here, and maybe the bad part, is that when Tony Alford took the job at Michigan, you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, there's a timeline and a very select group of people that would make this like an upgrade for Ohio State. If they can go out there and replace Alford with DeMarco Murray or Gillespie or Tashard Choice or Stan Drayton, or like that very small group of guys who you can point at it and go, okay, that's an upgrade for this reason or this reason. I don't know that if Ryan Day really has to go to the plan B list, I don't know that there's anybody on that list that you look at and say, okay, that's an upgrade. And then it becomes a more disappointing thing that happened. But is there, when you look at it, it's what now, 3 weeks until spring ball is over. So ultimately, could Ryan Day just coach running backs from here until April 13th? He could, but again, you don't want to enter the last week or those last couple of days when the transfer portal opens after the spring game without a real firm idea of where it's going. So it feels dangerous. Yeah,
it does feel dangerous. I remember you and I talking about this right after the Alford news broke and saying that the ultimate guy they hired to replace him is certainly going to be a name we're familiar with. And now we've gotten down to these names that, as of 3 days ago, I wouldn't have had any idea who the hell Curtis Luper is. So just being honest, I don't know. Maybe there's an NFL guy out there or something. I really have no idea.
Like Lee Marks at Memphis, like guys like Lee Marks at Memphis were like, I don't know what that guy could do. Like, I don't see a scenario where you can sell Lee Marks as an upgrade over Tony Alford in any way, shape, or form. So and I know that the timing of this put the Buckeyes behind the eight ball in a way that is difficult to guarantee that you go out and hit a home run, but it's Ohio State and they have more money to offer running backs coach than pretty much anybody in the country. So you would expect that it turns out to be a home run, but right now it feels like they're just still in the on deck circle. So that's enough baseball references. Let's talk 4-minute offense. What's on your mind? Is there anything specifically that you're wanting us to discuss?
I mean, the big thing was just going to be some of these guys visiting Michigan, but I don't know where Michigan stands for Bo Jackson. I think it's tomorrow. I think it's actually Monday when Marquise Davis is supposed to be there. He was just at Florida this weekend. I saw a photo of him arriving for his visit, and he looks like a college running back right now, I thought, from the photo that I saw. So I don't know. I don't know if the fan base should have any concerns about Michigan kind of sniping some of these guys with Tony Alford there now, and Ohio State doing God knows what at running back coach, or what kind of vibes you're getting from that. Or is it too soon to even know, because we don't know what the heck's going to be happening in that room with the coach?
I mean, I think it's too soon to know for sure. And I think that Ohio State, at least when it comes to the in-state kids, does have an advantage in that they are in-state kids and they still are Ohio State fans at heart. Both Marquise Davis and Bo Jackson grew up rooting for Ohio State and wanting to play at Ohio State. Now, once you enter the recruiting process and you start building all these relationships, all that stuff kind of goes out the window, but it is still in their heart of hearts, like part of who they are. So I don't think you have to worry too much about those kids making an early decision. I think you do have to worry about the fact that there is an opportunity for Tony Alford and Michigan to really capitalize on this period where Ohio State has no running backs coach. I mean, it's not good. It certainly puts the Buckeyes in a precarious spot, but I don't think that it really matters that much. Now, if Jordan Davis ends up visiting Michigan instead of Ohio State this week or something like that would be bad, right? Like those are the things you can look at and be like, well, that sucks. But I don't think that Ohio State, when you look at the running backs that they have offered, none of them are particularly close to making a decision. The guys that are available. And I mean, Torrey Blaylock is committing this week. Obviously, that won't be to Ohio State. They don't have a running backs coach. But no one else is in that spot where they are like in a hurry, which 2 months ago, I think that would have been considered a negative, because you'd have hoped that Tony Alford had the ability to speed up the in-state guys, but now you're kind of probably grateful that he didn't, you know?
Yeah.
That's
I guess that makes sense.
It's not good. I mean, there's no way you can look at it and be good about it, happy about it.
Yeah, I don't love the way where things are at right now, but I know, like you said, Ryan Day has a relationship already with Marquise Davis. So maybe that's enough to kind of hold things over until they do officially name somebody.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, it's overtime. It's Ryan Day working overtime. It's Tony Johnson, who was the running backs assistant, Larry Johnson's son, like him working overtime. Like these things are imperative for Ohio State to make sure that the relationship doesn't fall entirely apart just because Tony Alford is gone. And that's not easy to do, because Alford is really good at building relationships with recruits. But so is Ryan Day. I mean, and now it just means he has to be the one doing it. The unfortunate thing for Ryan Day is that, he's also been put in a position where he needs to be the quarterback recruiter. He needs to be the running back recruiter, like instead of being just the closer, like he'd prefer to be. So I don't know. Anything else?
I just real quick, we don't have a lot of defensive tackle names we've talked about too much, but that Landon Rink kid from Texas, was he there? Was it last week he was there? Or was it 2 weeks ago? Maybe.
Yeah. He was in 2-day visit. That was Monday and Tuesday of this week. He's got an official visit set up for first week of June. Like, he's a real guy for sure for Ohio State. And Maxwell Roy from St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, he's another guy. He visited this weekend. Ohio State's very much involved there. Trajan Odom from North Carolina, he visited this weekend. I haven't talked to him yet, so I don't really know how that visit went for him. But it's not a deep list currently for Ohio State. And again, like the defensive lineman they've offered, Elijah Griffin from Savannah, Georgia, just committed to USC today, the number 1 ranked player at that position. Isaiah Campbell committed to Clemson, and Mary Adams committed to Clemson. There's work to be done, and they really like Maxwell Roy, really like Landon Rink, and those are two that we know of. I think that there's an opportunity in the state of Ohio for a Cincinnati kid whose name is escaping me. Hold on, I'll find it. That's visited multiple times, and I would not be surprised if he gets an offer. I'm just going to keep talking until I
a defensive tackle
the name. Yeah, it's from Cincinnati. It is. This is really good entertainment for everyone. Why is it? I'm still struggling to find him. Drayden Pavey from Cincinnati Taft High School, 6'3", 305 pounds. Like, he's visited multiple times. I know Larry Johnson likes him. Camp multiple times. He'll camp again this summer. Like, I think you could see a scenario where Pavey ends up getting an offer this summer, and then it's him and Rink. Rink is interesting because I know Texas A&M is big time on his, in his recruitment. He was at USC this weekend as well. So, I mean, he's all over the place. So, it's Larry Johnson, man. Like, I don't know, the way he does it is just different than everyone else, and seems to generally find a way to work out.
Yeah. And Justin Hill, I think, was at USC this weekend too. Can you imagine how the fan base would react if we were in a What's that?
And Chris Henry Jr. was there too.
Yeah. Can you imagine how the Ohio State fan base would react if we had a situation like Georgia? Like, let's just say Justin Hill and Trey McNutt were in USC this weekend, and then all of a sudden Sunday morning they both just commit to USC. Talk about a freaking nightmare scenario.
I think it's just so funny how different coaching staffs recruit so differently. Like USC, I mean, they have the 4 commitments now on the day. They just picked up another one, Dominic Kelly, a 2026 corner from Tampa. 4 different kids committed today. And like, I'm trying to think back to the last time Ohio State had a day where it was like just a deluge of commits. Like, everyone like, oh, I got to do it. I was there this weekend. It was so awesome. I have to commit right away. Like, Ohio State just does not try to overwhelm people on these visits. And I wonder if they miss opportunities for some PR, because teenagers are so impressionable that you could find a way to like really ramp this up. James Franklin does a great job at that too. Like the you got to commit now or it's going to be the best moment of your life. Clemson does that too. Like I don't know how often that really like lasts, like that's the hard part. Like, if you're just trying for these splash weekends, like, it doesn't always last. I don't know. Yeah.
Or like the Tyjon Lindsey, Trayvon Grimes dodgeball dual commitment video.
Yeah.
That didn't work out too well for Ohio State.
Yeah. That was remember how like big deal it was to have commitment videos in 2016? Like the whole world, like that was all that mattered. Like Bleacher Report was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce those videos for like 3 minutes of a Twitter video, 90 seconds. And then what's the value in that? What's the return? What a weird world this is. Recruiting is weird, Andrew. That's the lesson on this episode of Talking Stuff. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you listening. Another big week of visits coming up for Ohio State. We will talk about that over at ohiostate.rivals.com. We'll have stories there. You can join up on subtext. If you are interested, 614-662-4509 to sign up to get a 2 free-week trial. We talk about everything there as well. And then, of course, here on Talking Stuff, we'll be back next Sunday for another episode and probably breaking down a commitment. We'll see if that goes as expected on Saturday. And whatever else happens this week, the Ohio State will be busy. First major scrimmage coming this weekend, Student Appreciation Day. A lot of visitors coming to town for that. So can't wait to be a part of it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. That's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. Goodbye.